Hey everybody, it's Peggy. I'm back again with another video. So today's topic is what to sell. Okay, selling is pretty easy. Selling is pretty simple, but you have to start with the product. So you have to decide on what you're going to sell. Now, I've already done the math video on sorting out mathematically what makes sense to sell. If you decide that you're going to sell something and you sit down and do the math and realize that it's unaffordable, then you need to make choices. And that's a whole different conversation that I'm not going to have right now, but we need to start with what are you going to sell? Well, for starters, stick with what you know. This is not the time I'm going to use my Etsy shop as a way to sell off stuff as I learn a new skill. Okay, actually, maybe it is. Okay. I started my shop selling drawstring bags, and now I have pocket pouches and 2 pocket bags and stuff like that. But I started my shop with what I knew. And then as I grew slowly. Hey, I'm going to offer a couple of these, see how they go over. I didn't just wake up one day and go, I want to add these to the shop. I'm going to put in 500 of them. Because if they'd have gone badly, what if I was making fundamental mistakes? What if there was issues? What if my customers didn't like them? What if there's complaints? It's like, oh, well, I appreciate that you're trying to learn a new skill. I appreciate that you're doing a new design, but this is crap. It's got holes in it. It's got this. It's got that. I'm going to make a complaint with Etsy because you sold me garbage, and then you lose your shop, because that's what happens if you sell your customers crap. So stick with what you know. It doesn't have to be something that you know with 100% absolute certainty, but you need to be confident that you're bringing a certain skill level to the table so that you will have a successful selling experience and happy customers. This is not the time. Here's a story time. This is not the time, because this happened about 3 years ago in an embroidery group that I was in. This is not the time to go out, buy a $20,000 embroidery machine, the big ones, the big industrial type ones, and then come back into your embroidery group and go, hi, I've decided to start embroidering and I'm going to sell it. Anybody know where I can get lessons on how to embroider? Don't do that. By the time she gets the training, the skills, and the experience that she needs to put out a product that people are going to buy without returning or complaining, she's out thousands and thousands of dollars. Make sure that you know it. This also bleeds into number 2. Make sure you have at least some of the necessary equipment on hand so that your expenses are going to be affordable. That's a Janome there. I did not start my business with this machine. I worked my way up to it, and that's fine. This is perfectly fine. I had a machine that was working beautifully for what I needed it to do. And then this is working really well. I'm going to get a better machine. And I did. Oh, this is working really well. I think I want a better machine. And I did. Stick with what you know. Stick with what you're already doing. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Like I said, $20,000 for an embroidery machine that you don't even know how to use because you've never embroidered before is not a good starting place for any business. It really isn't. If you decide that you're going to sell jams and jellies, but you've never sold a jam or a jelly, you've never put a jar, you've never processed that ever in your life, that is not the business to start with. Learn to make jams and jellies. Abso-fucking-lutely. Learn to make jams and jellies. Give it or sell it to your friends and your relatives. Get good at it. Get good enough. Get good enough that you're not going to have problems. That it's like, oh, this was really good, but it went moldy after 2 weeks. It's like, you don't want to sell that to somebody. They have to have a good experience, because if they come back complaining of your bad experiences, you're going to get shut down, because Etsy isn't in the business of letting bad business happen. So stick with what you know. Ideally, make sure that it's something that you already have. If what you know requires equipment, make sure that you already have at least the basics to get you started, so that your startup expenses aren't going to be that high. I didn't have to. I've built my way up to this over 4 years. Anybody who's seen me on my wife's channel has seen my crappy little area get bigger and bigger and more advanced with fancier and fancier shit over the years. That's how you do it. Okay. If you already have the big fancy shit, then yeah, absolutely. But stick with what you know. If you don't already know how to sew a straight line, opening a shop when you don't have the basic skills required. And like I said, like I said in a different video. Anyway, like I said, you can start off with a few basic things that you're good at and then gradually build it up as you build up your skills for other things. I started off with drawstring bags, and then I noticed pocket pouches. That's what I'm calling them anyway. I don't even know if they have a name. Folding wallet style bags. And it's like, oh, these are really cool. I think I made like over a dozen for my wife before. It's like, hey, you know what? These are actually, these are getting quicker, getting easier. I think I'll throw a few in the shop and see what happens. Stick with what you know. Don't take chances. Don't experiment. Experiment later. I've definitely experimented, but experiment later once you have a degree of success, once you have a degree of reputation, and once you can do so in a way that's not going to damage your reputation as a seller, because you're selling to people who have never met you, you're selling in an online environment, and your reputation is everything. So keep that in mind. Okay. Make sure you actually, number two, I guess we're numbering these. Are we on number 3? Stick with what you know. Make sure you have make sure that you are already at least somewhat equipped for it, or that the equipment you meet, like, a crochet hook. It's like, oh, I know how to, I'm really good at crocheting and I know how to crochet. The thing I want to sell though means I need to go get a new crochet hook. Yeah, who cares about that? But if like, oh, I want to do this and I need a super expensive sewing machine, you're not ready. You need to work your way up to that. Okay. So 2, 3, wherever we are right now. Make sure you actually own the rights to sell the thing you're selling. And this is a thing. People go in there, well, I hand draw my kids Disney characters myself, so I can sell them because I made them. It's like, no, you made the drawing. Disney owns the art. You're copying somebody else's art. Disney is a big one. Disney will come after you. Disney will absolutely come after you. And Disney will absolutely sue you if you decide not to go away. Disney will come after you and say, don't do that. And if you go, I don't agree with this, I should be able to sell this. It's like, okay, then we're suing you now. And I'll tell you right now, the minute Disney makes a complaint about you, there's different level of complaint. It's like, okay, this copyright's, get rid of it. And it's like, okay, well, he's still doing it. They'll just shut you down. And they don't even tell you why. Make sure that you own the rights to sell the thing that you're selling, because if the actual copyright holder comes along and makes a complaint, and there's this copyright, trademark, if the actual owner of the thing comes along and has a complaint, you can lose your entire business. And there are people who have built up 7 million sellers. It takes a while to be found. Great. You're making $5,000 a month for the year and a half it took you to be found, and now you're blackballed completely out of it. Cannot start another shop on Etsy, period. You're done, because once they get rid of you for that, they don't let you back in. And now, if Disney, you're on their radar, and if they ever find you doing it somewhere else, if they haven't already decided to sue you, and ever find you doing it somewhere else, they've got the grounds to sue you for everything you have. Disney's the big example because they will go after you, but so will Sanrio, and that's Hello Kitty and all of those guys. Warner Brothers will go after you for for most of their properties. Some companies, John Deere, will go after you. They do not share. Starbucks, they don't care. You want to make Starbucks mugs? They don't care, because they're selling coffee. They don't give a shit about their mugs. Be aware if you are selling something, oh, this is my take on Disney. No, it's Disney, and Disney will come after you. Sanrio will come after you. They will come after you. They are a thing. Do not use, oh, my take on, do not do a completely different drawing and then put in your description, oh, my take on Disney. That's trademark violations. Do not use the Disney font. Okay, Disney's the best example. Make sure you actually have the rights to sell it. Now, there are some people, there are people who make embroidery designs, and that's their business. As a matter of fact, I bought a few. I made a couple of my own, but most of the designs I bought, because it was just simply, oh, I was already thinking about making that. I'm not going to make it. I'm going to go buy it. I can't sell those designs. I cannot sell the design. I can make things and sell the thing, but I cannot open a shop selling embroidery designs, reselling a design that I bought from somebody else. That's a thing. Be aware that you're not copying what somebody else did. Be aware that there are some that don't care, and that's fine. The NFL, by the way, will come after you, and so will the NBA. NFL and NBA will come after you if they find you selling. So you have your NBA inspired mug that you made and you're selling on Etsy, you will lose your shop. They will, if the minute they find you. And the only reason why they haven't found you is because of the sheer number of people, but trust me, they'll get to you. And the bigger you are, the more, and don't tell yourself you've won. I'm going to rant on this a little bit. Don't tell yourself you've won because, oh, I opened a thing and I've got Disney all over the place and I've been selling it for 5 years now. Don't tell yourself you've won because the longer it takes them to find you, the more you're worth to sue when they find you. You're not winning. You are not winning. You're taking a huge risk. There are other companies, though, that you contact them. Contact Starbucks right now. Say, hey, I'm thinking of selling Starbucks mugs online, and I might be using some of your logo elements. Is that okay? And they're going to go, yeah, knock yourself out. They don't care. Okay. They might care now. They might have changed their mind. I don't know. I know that at one point they didn't care. Anyway, make sure that you actually own the rights to sell the thing yourself. If you want to make a mouse, make a mouse. If you want to make Mickey Mouse, think of something else because you're just asking for trouble. And I will tell you right now, for the entire time, from the time you start to sell that product until you eventually get shut down, because it will happen, you will be stressed to the nines every freaking day, and it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Okay, make sure that you still want to do it for hours a day, every day, for years. A popular product will stick around forever. If you want to stay profitable and stay in business and stay making money, then you need to keep doing. You can't. You can, but you can't. If I decide that I want to stop doing what I'm doing and start making pillows, that's fine. But the people that I sell to look for a certain product. So if I'm no longer selling that product, I have to attract the attention of people that want to buy the product. I'm starting over. People don't just automatically switch their buying habits because you switched what you're selling. If it's like, oh, I'm going to make I really hate making these, but I think I can get a couple bucks for selling them. That's not the product for you because you're going to get stressed, you're going to get miserable, you're going to end up in a job that you hate. Oh, this is doing really well and I'm making money and I'm paying my bills, but I hate it because I picked a product I don't actually like. You need to like it enough, you need to like it enough to make it every day. Period. For potentially years. I'm making a very specific product. And every now and again, I'll have a project that I'm working on. It's like, oh, I want to do this thing, but I've got extra. And now, every now and again, I'll put something new in the shop that's not related to tarot, and that's fine. But if people start a shop, they get successful, and they're like, I'm successful. My customers will follow me, and it's like, no, you're the mall. You're in the world's biggest mall. And once you stop selling the product that they're looking for, they'll just go to the next store that is still selling the product that they're looking for. Be aware of this, that if your product is popular enough and has longevity, that you're going to be fighting not fighting. I don't know. For me, it's not a fight. I fight against that by using different fabrics, by keeping the variety of fabrics up so I don't get bored. But you're risking some boredom and some frustration, and just be aware that it's there, because if you already know, oh, I don't handle boredom very well at all, then it's like, this might not be a product. The product you're thinking of might not be the product you should be selling, or you should be looking at a variety of products so that you can have a variety so that you don't, there's ways around the problem. It's not a make or break problem, but it's like, if you're going to, I'm going to target into just putting people's names on a t-shirt. It's like, if that's something, it's like, oh, that's already tedious and boring and I already don't like it, then either add new products so that you have variety in what you're offering, or be aware. Make sure that it's something you're going to be okay with, possibly for the long term, because some products have a lot of longevity, and you need to be aware of that. But if you're doing just little one-off projects, you're not going to have that problem, so it won't matter. Okay, make sure that what you're selling will accomplish and fit in with both your current and long-term goals. I actually wrote a lot of this stuff down. Okay, I keep using the crocheting example. Okay, so I'm going to read exactly what I wrote. Example: if you hand crochet a baby blanket for $100 and it takes 2 weeks to make them, then you won't be able to make enough money to live off that income. Period. Oh, it takes me 2 weeks to crochet a baby blanket. Okay, say you're crocheting after hours. Don't forget, if you've watched my other video and done the income calculator, you already know that you're figuring out how much per hour you're making and how long it takes to make a project. So if it takes 40 hours in a week for an average income. Okay, so if it takes you 20 hours to crochet a blanket because you set your timer and you've checked it all out, and you turn this into your 8-hour job, it takes you 2 weeks if you're doing it after work on your regular job. So if you turn this into your day job and it takes you 20 hours to make a blanket, and you sell a blanket for $100, then you are making $200 a week. I'd be caught up with the math on that. It's like, if it takes you 20 hours to crochet one blanket, and you sell it for $100 because nobody's selling them for more, and it's not, you've tried to sell for more and it's just not going. So you know that if you want to sell this blanket, you have to, that happens, right? Some products are so competitive that if you charge, some products are so competitive that you're really stuck with what you can charge, which is something else to be aware of on your income calculator. So if it takes you 20 hours to make a quilt and you want to turn this into your full-time job, then it's a 40-hour week for you to make $200, right? Be aware. If your income goals are to turn your Etsy shop into a full-time income, then this is not the product for you because it takes too long. So what you want to do is look for other products. As a matter of fact, there's two reasons why I use this for an example. My grandmother used to quilt all the time. And we would have, it could sometimes be, this is before the internet, so sometimes, she never sold her stuff, but sometimes it could be a challenge finding somebody to give it to. It's like, oh, don't you already have 5 of my blankets? Uh-huh. It's like, okay. Another thing is that I've heard from a couple of people who are really into knitting and crocheting, and they know they can't do the bigger projects, so what they do is they save all their scraps, bought themselves a little knitting machine, and make hats. That could be all you need to do. Small changes can make a big difference. But if you are determined that I will only sell this one product, I will only do this, I will only do that, then do your math, do your costing out, and make sure if you have a long-term goal of specific income targets, make sure that your product will actually meet those targets. Because that is a huge mistake that a lot of people make. They just lose track of that, right? Okay. Some products just don't sell, which is again where I got to is stick with what you know. Make sure that you have supply. Make sure that you're already well supplied to get started without a lot of investment, because some products just don't sell even if they're popular elsewhere. If you're trying to sell a basic gold chain, simple, easy. People like a basic gold chain. Nothing wrong with that. You're trying to sell that on Etsy. There has got to be a million sellers on Etsy that sell jewelry. You have got a screaming shit ton of competition. It is not. It is going to be a never-ending battle for to be seen. So if you're it is very, very difficult. The more time goes on, the bigger the big shops get. So if I'm going to buy something that's basic and simple, I'm going to buy, it's just human nature. I'm going to buy, I'm going to, unless I know you personally, I'm going to buy from a bigger, more established shop, especially if it has a good reputation and a good number of 5-star reviews. So the big guys on Etsy are continuing to get bigger. The little guys on Etsy, it's a challenge to get traction. Some products, even if they're already popular, may not be a product that you are going to be able to get the attention from that you would. And it could even just be the environment. Okay, Depop. Depop is a platform where you can sell used clothing, right? You can go onto Etsy and sell used clothing if it's vintage. So there is used clothing to be found on Etsy, vintage clothing, and that's a popular niche, right? Well, Etsy is so oversaturated with antiques and that sort of thing that it's hard to get traction in there. But Depop is smaller and geared for that, so it's easier to stay within that niche because then their entire customer base is looking for clothing. I think Depop is only clothing. Correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not on Depop. Anyway. So that's the basics of it. There's always other things to consider. And like I said, depending on what you're selling, your mileage will vary. If you have a product, okay, 3D printing. And I know a guy who's doing amazingly well in his 3D printing as a business, but there's other people that get into 3D printing and they're working from wherever, and their electricity costs are through the roof. They have a hard time sourcing the filament that they need to do their printing with. Their costs are through the roof. Sometimes your costs just don't warrant the product. And I don't know, and that I know in 3D printing, I know that fluctuates wildly depending on what you're making, but it also depends on whether you're getting your products in bulk or not. It depends on your level of computer skill, because there are inexpensive 3D printers that you can get, but you need a lot of skill to put them together and hook them up and set them up. And that goes back to stick with what you know. But yeah, some products just aren't going to sell. And this is why I tell people that start with what you know and try to make sure you've already got at least some of what you need on hand, because there are people, And I've encountered them, social media being what it is, you don't hear from people that are doing well, you hear from people who are struggling. I invested this many thousands of dollars in blah, and it's not selling. What do I do? Well, for starters, you should have invested less. Start slow, work your way up. And it's just the nature of the beast, right? Start with a product that is easier to do. If your overall goal is to sell blah, but you need a customer base first, then start with that item. Start with something that makes sense, a smaller, easier, less expensive version of the same thing, and then gradually start offering the more premium. Do whatever makes sense to you. There's plenty of ways to do this, but just be aware that some products just aren't going to sell, and you just aren't going to know. And there is an element of risk if you need to invest just to get started. There will be an element of risk with no guarantee of success. Stick with what you know. Stick with what you've already got some or all of the materials for, or at least the equipment. Like for me, I had the equipment. I just need to go buy a little bit of fabric that I was going to use anyway, right? Make sure that you're not going to get bored of it, because I hear that a lot. I hear that a lot, that boredom is its own special stressor and can really screw you up. And make sure it's going to fit your financial goals. Just be aware of your financial goals before you get started. It's not the end of the world. Oh, okay, I guess this is going to be a side gig. Being flexible is key to succeeding on Etsy, by the way. That is something that you always need to be aware of. If it's not going to meet your side goal, if it's not going to, okay, so I'm selling these blankets, and it's not meeting my long-term goals, but it's bringing in a trickle income that I can set aside and use to buy the materials or whatever that I need to make something that will accomplish my goals, right? What I did when I was doing the embroidery, I used the money that I was earning from the embroidery. I kind of costed that out. I did the math. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing some embroidery, and this is all nice. Well, I'm going to keep embroidering. Okay, now I've made enough money. I kind of set aside the money, and it's like, okay, because I really want this other machine. For me, it's just all about buying sewing machines, apparently. And then I use the profits from one project to upgrade the other project, that sort of thing, right? It can be, starting small and working your way up can fit in with your long-term earning goals, but instead of deciding, oh, I want to be financially independent in 3 months, it might be 3 years. It's just reality 101. Okay, some products just don't sell. That's really it. So the biggest piece of all of these, I would say stick with what you know is number one. And yeah, I think that's the biggest one. Stick with what you know. If you want to learn a new skill, learn the skill first. Learn the skill first. Build up enough skill with it that that's fine. Oh, I really want to learn woodworking. Awesome. I really want to learn woodworking, and I'm going to sell some of the stuff I make. Awesome. That's awesome. But if you're only doing it to sell online, you're probably not in for a good time. If you're doing it because it's already something you're going to do, it's like, well, I'm already going to do this anyway, so I'm going to be keeping an eye out for ways to monetize this. Well, not a problem. Go for it. That's awesome. But yeah, that's it. That's selling. That's how you figure out what to sell, because what you're selling is important, but if these things aren't snapping into place for you, you're in for a miserable time. And for most people, it's not. For most people, it's a pretty easy one-step process to think it through. But depending on what you're selling, you may need to sit down and think with it. You may need to sit with this for a while and really give it some thought. It depends on what you're selling. For me, there was no thinking it through. It's like, oh, well, I want to sell the extra bag that I'm making, and I actually have a sewing machine. Oh, and my fabric. Well, I'm just buying the fabric, and there's no restriction. I don't buy copyrighted fabrics. If it says not for resale or whatever, I don't buy them. So it's like, okay, well, I know how to sew these bags. I actually have the machine that I need to do it. I actually have extra fabric, so I can get started at zero cost. I already have all the other materials. So this is a 5-minute process, and I checked off everything. What are my long-term goals? Oop, my wife just got home. What are my long-term goals? Well, my long-term goals aren't that aggressive, so I'm good. And some projects just don't sell. That's fine, because I'm already doing this for my wife anyway. If it doesn't sell, I'm out very, very, very little as part of my process. I'm good. It took me 5 minutes to think this through. Takes an hour to discuss it, but it takes 5 minutes to actually experience it. So keep that in mind. Of course, I tell you that now at the end instead of at the beginning, so sorry. Anyway, like, subscribe, ring the bell, comment. If you have any other observations, questions, or things that you want to add or discuss, leave a message below. Obviously, I love to hear from you guys. And don't forget to subscribe because I'm taking over the world and I want you to be a part of that because, this is important to me. And in the meantime, I'm going to get going and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.